And okay, so this is all about digital T-level. Basically, the philosophy behind the T-levels is really responding to the needs of a variety of learners. Within school, you know, we are very keen. Sorry, I've got a few people I want to add in. There we go. Okay, sorry. Okay, so the philosophy basically is responding to a variety of different learners, and there's a big push really on making sure that we have a range of courses that meet a range of different student needs. So the T levels helps us to do that. You know, we currently offer A levels, BTECs, and the T level is just another strand in the type of course that you can do. The big thing about T levels is the employability, and I'm going to come on to in a minute or two talking about the work placement element of it. And it's not just about developing students' knowledge, but it's about developing the students' ability to be able to apply that knowledge in the workplace, but also develop those employability skills, those soft skills that perhaps we as adults take for granted. So T levels are the equivalent of 3 A levels. It's a very big course. They've been developed in collaboration with employers and businesses. And the idea behind that is it makes the content that's in the T level very, very, very specific and very, very, very current. And certainly we've been teaching this in September now, and a lot of the content that we've been planning are things that we perhaps not really had much opportunity to teach before, and we're developing our skills as teachers in that respect as well. Now there's a good mix of classroom learning. So there will be a big proportion of what you do is going to be based in the classroom, and it's going to be based around learning the theory that you need to understand in order to pass the qualification. There's also, excuse me, there's also an on-the-job experience, which is an industry placement, and that should last approximately 315 hours, which is a minimum of 45 days working within the industry. Hopefully, this will provide you with the knowledge and experience that you need to get a foot in the door into the career path that you actually want to follow, and that specifically with the digital T level that we're offering, that path will be software development. So one of the questions that we often get is, what is the difference between a T level and an apprenticeship? Now, apprenticeship is typically 80% on the job, whereas 20% will be in the classroom. So we often talk about day release. It's the opposite way around really for T levels, and it's basically 80% in the classroom with about 20% going off into the workplace. So really, it kind of gives us not quite a full apprenticeship feel, but more of an A-level feel, but not fully over to the A-level side, if that makes sense. So it's like a halfway point in between the two. I'm just going to stop just for a second, because I don't want to get too far into this presentation and find out people can't hear. So again, has everyone managed to hear me okay and see the presentation?
Yes.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so the T level itself is split into, there's 4 sections that you need to be aware of. As the core section, which is about theory and the core skills and information that you need in order to work in that industry. There's also the specialty skills, so that's the opportunity to specialize. In our case, it's specialize as a software developer. The industry placement with an employer is obviously a big draw to the subject as well. And in order to pass the qualification overall, you also need to hit a minimum standard in English and maths, which is a grade 4 in both. Obviously, you would need to get that throughout the qualification if you didn't get that on entry to the 6th form. Okay, so this slide actually shows a bit more visually in terms of how the qualification looks. So you can see that at the top, you've got the actual technical qualification. It lasts, in terms of teaching hours, it lasts approximately 1,400 teaching hours, which is a lot of time. The core component makes up half of that, and then the occupational specialism makes up the second half. It's the core component that we start with in year 12, and then we move on to that towards the end of year 12 and into year 13, onto the occupational specialism. So I'll come on to what's actually in each of those in just a second. Now, in terms of the industry placement, whereas the core component and the occupational specialism, you will get a grade for those. The industry placement, you don't necessarily, but it's something that you have to actually participate in. Without that industry placement, you can't gain the full qualification. And it's the same with the maths and English. You have to hit that minimum of a 4 or above in both English and your maths. Now, in terms of the core content, it's split into 2 sections, and there's 2 papers. So in terms of the first paper, it very much revolves around programming and problem solving. So you can see straight away that the first 2 strands of that first paper is going to be looking at algorithms, and it's going to be looking at how to program in the programming language Python. Now, we do assume that people haven't done any programming when they come onto the course. We always start at the ground up. We believe it's important to lay those good foundations. But those students that have done computer science have got a particular advantage because they've already learned how to program in Python already, and they've got a lot of the skills that they need in order to progress in this course. The second part of the first paper revolves around emerging technologies and legislation. This is where really, for me, it gets quite exciting, because there's a lot of content in there that we've not had the opportunity to cover, maybe in the traditional A level. So we look at things like artificial intelligence, augmented reality. We look at the what we call IoT, which is the technology behind things like the Ring doorbells and the Hive heating and stuff, where these home devices have actually linked to the internet. But it's also important to look at the legislation around that as well, and look at the laws that govern the use of technology and digital when developing these kind of software programs. Paper 2 revolves more around the business context. So it's about how digital is being used in within industry. It kind of, if we move on to the data kind of side of things, it's looking at what data businesses can collect, how they can collect that, and how they can use and analyze that data. We often refer to the difference between data, information, and knowledge, and it's about how we go from collecting raw data and actually turning that into knowledge that can be analyzed by the companies in order to help drive their company further forward. There's also a section on digital environment, which is the computer systems that businesses use, which include things like networks and having an understanding of how different network systems work, and also the need to test. So if you've got a computer system or a piece of software, it's the importance of testing and how that can be tested as well. And finally, there's the security issues that businesses have to face. So we look at things like hackers and the tools that hackers can use in order to gain access and steal information from businesses, and how that can be prevented as well. Now, each of those papers roughly take about 2.5 hours to complete, and that makes up 2/3 of the core content. The final third comes in the employer set project. So this is a bit like an NEA that you would do at GCSE, like a coursework project, where you get given 4 or 5 tasks to complete. Each task has a particular focus. So task 1 has always been given a plan. So students will be given a situation in terms of what you've been asked to develop this piece of software. These are the people that are on your team. How are you going to deploy them? How are you going to cost it all out, because you're paying each person a different amount? So it's much more of a work-based problem as opposed to the theoretical problems that we've taught before. There's an opportunity for students to design and develop pieces of software in the Python programming language, but also take something that's been created already and fix the issues that they could encounter. And the last task is always going to be evaluation and being reflective in how you worked and how you were able to solve the problems themselves. And all of that project will take approximately 15 hours to complete. Now, in terms of the specialist content, this is a big unit. It's equal to everything we've just talked about in terms of the core and the employer set project. So it's broken down into, again, 4 or 5 tasks, but each task is much bigger, and it specializes particularly in software development. So students will get a chance to learn a second programming language, and they'll be able to develop or be able to create software that meets needs of a given task using that programming language as well. Each task is broken down into a set period of time. So, I mean, I spoke to my year 11s today, and we talked about the size of the assessment being about 70 hours. And the way that that works is you'll be given like a task that asks you to analyze the problem, which is in this first box on the top left corner of the screen. And they'll be given an amount of time, maybe 20 hours, to actually work through a series of activities, a bit like a coursework task, really. They get to know what the mark scheme is, so they understand what the examiners are actually looking for, and then at the end of that task, everything that they've completed gets sent off to the exam board to be assessed. Now, in terms of, I'll come on to assessment actually in just a second. Now, in terms of the industry placement, there's a big difference between work experience and an industry placement. A work experience typically is 1 to 2 weeks. It's about gaining those general employability skills and giving you a bit of a taste for what the work environment is like. Obviously, the placement being 45 days, it really allows you to get your teeth into some really big projects and working with companies that have got a specific focus in the digital industry. I mean, ideally, we'd be sending off students to be software developers effectively and be able to complete projects that the software development projects that their companies can give them. Right, so in terms of industry placements and why they're important, basically, we feel that the work experience itself is a valuable experience and a very good experience, but sometimes they're not always specific to what the learner wants to do. So the industry placement itself gives them a real opportunity to go in and get experience of what that industry is like. Sometimes students aren't particularly ready to leave an educational setting. They don't necessarily want to go into the workplace, but they don't necessarily want to do A-levels. So this really allows them to have that halfway point, really. So students can kind of come and still follow that academic route and something that they're really interested in, but they can also go out and experience that world of work in perhaps a more controlled setting. The government themselves have kind of designed these T-levels to try and generate skill set for the future that they've identified as potentially being a weak point. You know, we want one of the, obviously computers being as they are in a lot of industries, you know, programmers are going to be vastly in demand. So it's about developing a generation of people that are very competent programmers, and by the time they get to employment, even in the first jobs, they've got an excellent understanding of what the rigors are going to be like of the job and what the job's going to be like itself. And it also really helps students to develop their own technical skills and prepare themselves for the world of work as well. So in terms of the actual grading, the grading overall for the T-level will be pass, merit, distinction or distinction star. However, there's a slight variation between the two units. So the core side of the course, which will be completed in year 12, you will actually get a grade A star to E. The occupational specialism will be pass, merit, distinction or distinction star. And then what happens is we use a grid basically to say, well, if you got this grade in your core and you get this grade in your occupational specialism, that works out at a pass, merit, distinction or distinction star overall. Now, what's important is where can we go with that qualification as well. So there are going to be students that are going to want to go onto apprenticeships or higher apprenticeships. There are also going to be students that may potentially want to go onto university. So for the T-levels, UCAS points are valid for each of the grades that you can get. If you've encountered UCAS points before, you'll see that those numbers there are actually quite high. That's particularly because it's the equivalent of 3 A-levels. So a distinction star, for example, is roughly the equivalent of 3 A stars and 3 different independent A-levels. And it goes all the way down to with students, you know, getting a pass. Do they get a pass with a C or above? That will give them 96 UCAS points. Or if they didn't and got a D or an E, not that anybody will be getting that, of course, but it's a case there is a UCAS point there available as well. Now we're coming to about the halfway point, I suppose, of a new build for the T-level. So by the time we get to September and you are starting the T-level, we've got a T-levels digital hub, which is going to be there specifically for the teaching of T-levels. So there's 2 main classrooms which are going to be teaching the content that you need. There's one that's going to be based around and geared towards programming. And there's going to be another one which is going to be geared towards more the theoretical side of the course as well. Now, in terms of the collaborative task room, one of the things with the occupational specialism is that students are expected to work collaboratively with other students on the same project. So what we wanted to create was a breakout space where students can actually go and with their team and actually start to plan out how to do an individual task as well. And that doesn't even necessarily have to be in the lesson time, that will be available to them throughout. Obviously, the T-level timetable we've already said is bespoke. So you'll find that if you're spending all your time in that particular room as well, there's obviously facilities like toilets and things like that for students as well. So what you'll have access to if you choose to do the T-level is you'll have a pastoral tutor, very much the same as if you were doing an A-level course as well. Now, obviously, there will be a big work placement, element to the course as well. So there's going to be an important need for having careers advice as well throughout, not just year 11, but their time in the sixth form as well. Now, we have got on in school an industry links mentor, and that's a person that can go out and be your link when you're out on placement and find out and make sure that everything's going okay, find out the kind of things that you're doing, and hopefully any kind of concerns or any issues that might arise, they will be the first port of contact in order to rectifying those. It's a bespoke timetable. The students this year that have started in year 12, they're doing approximately 40 hours a week. We feel like it's really, sorry, I'm going to change that. It's 40 hours a fortnight, 20 hours a week. So that means typically students will be doing 4 hours of lessons per day on average, but that gives them a little bit of time to get their homework done as well, but gives them much more of a feel of a real working day and helps them build up that stamina in order to be able to complete that work placement where students are going to be expected to stay maybe till 5:30 in the evening. It also gives you the opportunity to work with national companies as well, and also, you know, we pride ourselves on constantly looking for new opportunities for students, and that's the Industry Links Mentor. That's one of their jobs, is to keep finding new potential, keep finding new potential organisations in which we can work with as well. The final side really is just some contact details. Now, my email address is mp@painsleigh.staffs.sch.uk. If you've got any questions specifically to do with the digital T-level, then please feel free to email me. Ms Oberman is co@painsleigh.staffs.sch.uk. If you've got any questions about T-levels in general, or any T-levels that are potentially coming on board, then that's why I've included that email on that slide.